Over the years, I have learned that it is better to read a great book multiple times than it is to read a lot of bad books once. And there's a few books that I revisit every 1 to 2 years and I reread because as I grow as a person or as a business person, they provide me new insights. And that's one of the hallmarks to me of a great book is something that gives you what you need where you are and helps you get to that next step. But then when you're at that next step, it is something different for you to get out of it to give you what to need to continue to grow. And there's kind of no end to that. One of these books is this book called Perennial Seller by Ryan Holiday. Now, Ryan's obviously written a lot of books. We've spoken about it on the podcast before. In my opinion, this is both his best and his most underappreciated book. And I'm actually not alone in that. There's kind of this underground contingent of really, really high level business people that look at this book as something sort of a Bible. It never gained the sales numbers. I think that it will. I think that this book will increasingly sell more and more and more, but it never really gained the sales numbers as some of his other books have. You know, his other books that have sold millions of copies. I was at a wedding for my friend Giovanni Marsico, who runs one of the biggest like business mentorship kind of program, coaching, not even coaching program, but just like networking communities. And so I was at his wedding and I was sitting beside somebody who is kind of one of the like the growth experts, I guess. He's on stages a lot. He's speaking a lot. He's very well known in the community of people who want to scale their businesses. And we were just geeking out for like 30 minutes on this book. And he said the same thing to me. He's just like, I couldn't believe it when I discovered this thing. I mean, this is the Bible. Like, why are more people not talking about this? And I agree. Why are more people not talking about this book and particularly some of the messages that are in it? Because this is a book about how to do work that actually lasts. If you follow this podcast for long enough, you know that I hate doing things more than once. If you follow my work for years, that's a hallmark of the Online Trainer Academy. That's a hallmark of the Online Trainer Mentorship. That's a hallmark of everything that I've done is like, hey, doing work once and making it good is hard enough. You want to get as much leverage. You want to get as much out of your efforts as possible. And yet, so many of us seem to be pulled into this world where, hey, it's one and done. We're going to spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or even more on some sort of a work and we're going to put it on the internet and maybe it'll do well. Maybe it won't do well. Either way, it's going to be gone in a day and a half. I don't want to do that shit, man. I want to create work that lasts. Everything that I do, and I can't say that I'm successful with everything that I do in this way, but everything that I do, I'm doing because I want it to serve me over time. I want it to compound upon itself over time. And since writing this book, if you followed it, when did this book come out? I don't even know what the year was. This book came out in 2017. Since writing this book, the author, Ryan Holiday, has built one of the most impressive brands, I think, in the world with the Daily Stoic. It sold millions and millions of books, other associated products, everything from courses to medallions to everything in between. And he's generated platforms with millions of followers across every social media thing. The Daily Stoic email list has 750,000 daily readers. Bonkers. And he did that, basically started it as this book came out. So if that's not a testament to how valuable the material in this book is, because if you read this book, you're like, oh, I can see why he's doing what he's doing, how he's doing it. And so what I've done is I've highlighted and I've tagged the shit out of this book, if you could see it. But because I write in my books. And if you ever buy one of my books, write in that thing, man. Dog ear that thing, tag that thing, like make it yours. I dog ear and highlight the shit out of my books. And what's interesting is that as I go back through the book time and time again, what I'll do is I'll sometimes untag certain pages and I'll tag other pages based off of what I need at that time. And so what I did before this podcast is I actually pulled out some of my favorite passages that have stood the test of time for me. And I thought it'd be really cool to read you it, and we can have a bit of a conversation about them. Have either of you, Amber, Ren, have either of you read this book?
Nope.
No, it's in my cart, like usual. I'm trying to slow down my book buying, but it's in my cart.
Don't slow down your book buying. Books are unquestionably the single best investment anybody can ever make. You are able to buy years of wisdom, if not a lifetime of wisdom from somebody for 20, 30, 40 bucks. Even if you don't read the whole book, even if you just read the title, even if you just look at the book on your shelf and feel bad about not reading the book, you'll still be reminded about what you are wanting to accomplish with that book. And it's still going to serve you. So even if you buy a book and you never read it and it's on your shelf and you look at the book and you look at the spine and you look at the cover and you think about the author and you think about what you want to get out of it, it will still probably do more good for you than anything else you could spend that $30 or $40 on. I have a rule, which is the second that anybody who I trust recommends a book, I buy it. The second that I come across a book that looks interesting, I buy it. I don't even think about it. And I don't get to all of them, and I don't feel bad about it. And if I'm reading a book that I don't particularly like, whatever, it doesn't jive with me at that moment, I just put it down and I go on to the next. It's fine. Right? Life's too short for books you don't align with. And even good books. You know, Harry Potter is over 10,000 1- and 2-star reviews. Right? Even the most popular books in the world, not everybody likes. Okay. This is actually on page 3. So, most introductions are pretty crummy. This is page 3. The first passage that I'll read to you. He says, "It's hard to see how it could be otherwise when the top thought leaders and business experts deceive us with shortcuts and tricks that optimize for quick and obvious success. Creators resort to hacking bestseller lists, counting social media shares, or raising huge amounts of investor capital far before they have a business model. People claim to want to do something that matters, yet they measure themselves against things that don't, and track their progress not in years, but in milliseconds." Damn. That hits hard, doesn't it?
Yep.
It's hard not to catch yourself measuring yourself against something that is very short term, though, isn't it? And even taking a step back and knowing, okay, well, clearly the most important thing, like for me right now, the most important thing for me to be working on is the book that I'm working on. There's no question in my mind that that is the most important thing for me to be working on. That thing is over a year away. Its release date. End of January 2025, as of right now. That's if I hit my deadlines. We will see. But if that happens, I'm under so much constant pressure to almost perform on a daily basis with all the short-term stuff. And one of the decisions that I made about 2 weeks ago, I haven't talked about it yet here, but one of the decisions I made was that I am going to view social media as a lagging indicator of my success in other places. It's a place where I talk about what I do in other places. It's not a place that gives me permission to do stuff in other places. Now, this is easy for me to say because I've taken the time to build enough of a platform that a lot of people will pick up the phone when I call. And I think that maybe is part of it. But to what end, I guess, is what I ask. You got to have enough social proof, and that could be just reputation offline, people that you know, people you've served, people you've helped, or online social proof where somebody could take one look and be like, oh, okay, well, like enough people think that there must be something going on here, so I'll have a look at it. You've got to have enough social proof, but then to what end? At what point do you stop? I know people who have 500,000 followers, I know people who have 1 million followers that have never actually built anything. And I don't think ever will, because they're so obsessed with, okay, I have 520,000 followers today, I need 522,000 followers tomorrow. To me, number one, that's just a game that I don't want to play. I'd rather be proud of the work that I do and not have it disappear. But also, I think that actually working on something meaningful and substantive is going to set you apart in the future. Because so few do it. So few do it. Even people who write something like books, most books are kind of hacked together these days. And it's really hard not to, because there's so much pull away from, okay, I'm actually going to put my all into here. It's, no, you can use this hybrid self-publishing service and get a book out that's professionally published. Or no, you can just hack together this like super low-end membership site. Yeah, you just go here, you go click, 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 and all of a sudden you can sell your subscription services for $10. It's like, yeah, but your subscription services are kind of shit, because you're spending all of your time figuring out how to entertain people on the internet. I mean, I don't even like that. To me is the single biggest global, I don't know what you would even call it, Wen. What's a good word for this? Stopping point? Like
Bottleneck.
Bottleneck?
Bottleneck. That's a good word.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
That to me is the single biggest bottleneck out there today. Is just, it's so easy to be shown and addicted by all of these things that are in our face, and so we give them outsized importance, or we put outsized importance to them.
The absence of gatekeeping. So go ahead, Amber.
No, I was just thinking it's hard to determine what to focus on, especially things that are going to give you the biggest ROI when you don't get immediate feedback. That right. Internal dialogue is really hard to fight back against if you don't have proper support to help you know that you're on the right path. Because otherwise, right. If you're not getting that feedback, you're constantly questioning yourself. And if you don't have other people in your environment who understand what you're trying to do and help you battle that, you're left with those immediate indicators of, well, this is what's working, this what isn't working. And so it's interesting because I fully agree, but I also wonder, how do we help people with that? I mean, obviously, we have OTA and OTM and things like that, but for other people, they're kind of stuck unless they do something kind of like that.
Well, they're kind of stuck until they read chapter 13 of the Obvious Choice book that's coming out in the end of...
Problem
in
solved.
The end of... I mean, chapter 13, so the way that the book is structured right now is part 1 is basically finding your way, how to fight against all of these outside forces. Part 2 is doing the thing. So part 2 is becoming the obvious choice. Part 3 is staying the obvious choice. Right? So how do you keep it up? And the last chapter of part 2 is basically finding your good enough, and how to find it, but also how to make sure that it's right for you, and be okay with that, and execute upon that. So that is very much covered. One of the things my editor is really pushing for in this book, which is great because I think naturally I might not have done it myself, is really, how do you make use of this stuff? I think I've done a phenomenal job describing what's going on, talking about what's really happening in the real world. Let's stop bullshitting. Let's stop all this self-help stuff. What do I say? Well, it'll be in the next episode where I'm talking about it, but I basically talk about how you need to enjoy the process. And I just say the next line. I'm just like, but you've heard that before. I know. That's in every self-help book ever. And yet, I don't. I try, and I just say like, so here's what I've recognized happens, or here's what I recognize I am doing when I'm able to enjoy ounces of the process, and what I find that I start doing again when I'm messing up. So yeah, chapter 13 of the book. We get into that. When what were you talking about? The absence of gatekeeping. That was, I want to cycle back to that thread. That was interesting. That's an interesting term.
At the inception of the internet, as we first were sort of universally allowed access to things like writing a book or developing a web series or making music easier,
Right.
it seems so euphoric, right? Because all these people that were very serious and talented and about the work, now they didn't have to worry about their positioning, proximity. They didn't have to worry about the lack of money to start a thing. Right? You could do it in your living room. And then over time, it faded into everybody's got access. Let's find the cheat code, right? And that's sort of where we are now, where I think the people that didn't have access, that had a serious belief and or passion for what they were trying to produce, I think we've passed through all of those people already, and what we're left with is people who have seen the remnants of that and now want to artificially engineer it in 30 days or less.
Yeah.
I often think about what would it be like if we now have more gatekeeping in place.
I've gone full circle on that question. I've gone full circle. I'm the type of person who I've never taken outside investment. Mm-hmm. I've never worked in any kind of a partnership, nothing, right? And I used to take a lot of pride in that, where I was a lone wolf. I still am, really. I self-published everything that I did. I self-funded. I bootstrapped everything that I did. I mean, I started my entire career, online business career, as a solo personal trainer, as an independent contractor at a gym, at a small gym in Toronto. And as I made money, I reinvested it over and over and over and again and started to build up, right? And I took a lot of pride in that. And I think you're right, when at that time, that's probably the right thing to do. Whereas I think now I'm kind of leaning the other way, where actually there is a need for gatekeepers, because it's just, there's too much information. There's too much to know. You're probably not very good at whatever you're trying to do. Even if you are very good, there's probably a lot of other people who can almost like check you on that. Mm-hmm. And the hard part is finding the right people who are really like experienced and an expert in it. But if you can find that, and your incentives are in line with theirs, like you're both going towards the same goal, like with a book, like you have a publisher, they want to sell a lot of books, you want to sell a lot of books, like those are aligned incentives. You may not agree with the direction that they're going, they might not agree with yours, but as long as your incentives are aligned, you can have an open and honest conversation. If the incentives are misaligned, then you can't have a conversation about it, because you both want different things. But the gatekeepers, I think, are useful for consumers. I don't look at self-published books anymore. I can't. There's just too much. There are too many bad books now than there ever used to be. Whereas if something, and there are even a few publishers that publish really bad books. No, I'm not going to shit talk any publishers publicly. But if you meet me and we have a beer, then I'll tell you who I think that is. But there are certain publishers that are just hammering out books. And it's to the point where if a friend of mine has a book published by one of those publishers, I actually won't look at their book. Because I just know that the thoughtfulness of publishing isn't there. It's not the friend's fault, it's the publisher's fault. And whereas if they're published by, a big publishing house, it's like, okay, I know what went into this. I know this was at minimum a 2-year journey. I know at minimum at least 3 other top professionals in publishing and editing touch this thing. They're not going to let you put out nonsense. If you were by yourself, you would. If I were to self-publish this book that I'm coming out with right now, it probably would have come out a year ago. And it would have been a book for basically how, like another book of like, here's what you need to know about doing a coaching business, that would not have been as well thought out. I really respect very clear thinkers these days. People who understand that there's no clear answer, but they can still make their point in a way that is persuasive, in a way that's helpful for you, while not preaching to you and saying my way is the only way. And as a writer, as an educator, I've always fallen into the trap of left to my own natural devices where I get very preachy. And if you were to read my first drafts of anything that I write, they're very preachy. And that's one of the things that I edit back, because it's not how I think, it's just how I naturally write. Okay, let's move on to the next. What was I going to get into this? Okay. Even as someone who loves the challenge and creativity and rigor of marketing, I'm alarmed at how many creators gloss over creating. They fritter away their time on Twitter and Facebook, not killing time, but believing they are building up followers to be the recipients of their unremarkable work. They have meticulously crafted brands and impeccable persona crafted through media training. They spend money on courses and read books on marketing to develop sales strategies for products they haven't even made. All this churn may feel productive, but to what end? What does that all mean? You're spending all your time worried about how you're going to get your magical thing out into the world, and you're not spending enough time on your thing itself, making it great. It's productive procrastination.
I just like that you said they fritter on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's the line. That made me happy.
They fritter away their time on Twitter and Facebook. I know.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful.
What can you do now? They flex away their time. They
wrex their time on X.
They get Rex by making too much of a flex on X.
They wrex themselves before they X their self. That's what it is. Don't wreck yourself before you X yourself.
Right. So there's not a lot to add to this. It's kind of an extension, I think, very much on the first point that we were talking about. But the message here is great marketing is only going to make a bad product fail faster. A great product can exist and will do very well without great marketing. A bad product will not succeed no matter how good the marketing is.
So here's a question that I think people are going to have, because I think there's two messages that we've given, right? So one is we've talked about, is it Thomas Edison or whoever, about like getting the idea out there first before building the product versus this here. And so that it can sound like contrary to like different advice that are like not in the same direction. So how would you address that?
Yeah. So the Edison story is, the inventor Thomas Edison, whenever he was struggling with an invention, one of the things that he would do is he would call reporters and give a date when he's going to launch something that he's discovered, whatever, a couple of weeks in the future. And he would create this event around it because that manufactured expectation of others forced him to figure this thing out. When you have something waiting for something, then you figure that thing out pretty quickly. And he was quite successful. And that's what we recommend with things like the Founding Client Challenge. I think it's very different, Amber, for sure. Number one, if it's a service where you're just never really going to know until you do it. Like the first step of online training, as an example, is to get a client. Like you just have no idea about anything else. The first step is to get a client. With a product, it's a little bit different, but I think part of the process is to iterate on the thing as you're developing the thing. I've been writing this book for a year and a half now. I've been announcing it the entire time, multiple times a week, very publicly, sharing bits of it, talking about it on the podcast, iterating on it, improving on it in real time with real people. I think that's before the now books are very interesting because they are very much a finished product when you put them out. Most products are not. Most products you can take in feedback and continue to iterate, which is part of the appeal with books, to be honest with me, is that like when it's done, it's done. But great books actually are written as part of communities. I mean, James Clear took 4 or 5 years. He took a long time to write his book because he tested the material ad nauseum as he was writing the book. The reason why the biggest thing that he does in that book that's so well done is just the amount of like one-liners and really, really quick hit phrases. And those were tested. Actually, if you go through his old blog posts, if you go through his old Twitter, you'll notice there are multiple cases where there are different formats of him saying the same thing. And he's testing in real time with an audience what hits and what doesn't hit, so that the finished product has all of the best stuff in it. I think that's the way to do it. I mean, that's the way I'm doing it.
It's a comedian working their show. Yep. By the time you see the Netflix version, they've been in 100 little clubs, taking out the jokes that didn't land and doubling down on the stuff that did and changing one word here and one word there.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes them an hour, or it takes them a year to build an hour.
Get that hour, yeah.
And then they throw it out once they film the Netflix special and start again. Some of them do it in a year, some of them do it in 2 years. Even the ones who do it in a year, like I heard Louis C.K. talking about it. He basically said after doing it 3 or 4 times, he just couldn't keep up. Like to build an hour of material in a year, he couldn't keep up that pace. It was too intense. That just shows you how much goes into every second of those types of shows. How they say it, their ups, their downs, their body language. Even one of the things that I noticed, who was the comedian that I saw? Might have been Matt Rife, who his Netflix special was very disappointing. I think he's funny as all hell. Yeah, I think he's funny as all hell, but his Netflix special, like I don't care about any of the offensive stuff. I think that's funny most of the time, but it was just not funny. Was a lot of his shorter stuff I really think is quite good. But one of the things that he does in there, and I noticed it the second that he did it, was his like audience play was very clearly prepared. Because you could tell, and you see this with a lot of comedians in shows, where they'll actually use the audience to get into their next batch of jokes or to the next monologue or whatever it is. And they'll look around the audience when they come out and they're like, oh yeah, there's a black guy with a white girl. There's an interracial couple. There's an older woman. There's a whatever, right? And they'll just kind of keep that in the back because they'll know that the way that they're going to get into this joke is making fun of an interracial couple. So he'll be like, you two, how'd you get together? And then all of a sudden, and it seems spontaneous, right? It seems natural. But I can tell you that they have practiced that 100 times at little shows in real time. All right, let's go on to the next. We're on page 49 now. One of the best pieces of advice I've gotten as a creator was from a successful writer who told me that the key to success in nonfiction was that the work should either be very entertaining or extremely practical. Notice they didn't say should be very fulfilling to you personally, or should make you look super smart, or capitalize on some big trend. Those concerns are either secondary or implied. It's better to be focused on these two timeless use cases of enjoyability or utility. And I'll add to it, if you can do both of those, you're crushing it. But extremely practical. And we see this with people. Who was it? Greg Knuckles. I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Stronger by Science. They created the Macro Factor app. He is not entertaining, man. But holy crap, he's practical. He is practical, he's applicable, he's detailed, he's meticulous. And over time, he's continued to be that way and has built a hugely dedicated audience and respect amongst a lot of other people in the field. To the point where I think Macro Factor is like, I don't even know, 50, 100,000 paying users. It's like, it's a hugely valuable app that they've created. Their podcast, their community, it's really strong. And it is much slower to build that way. And you don't see it kind of when you're doing it. So it can be much harder, especially in this day and age. But again, this goes back to this idea of producing real substantial work versus this kind of short form stuff. I actually think that the value of doing work the type of way that how Greg does it, I actually think is more valuable than it's ever been, because fewer and fewer people than ever are doing it. And that's why I think it stands out a lot more. Or very enjoyable and very entertaining. We talk about this, right? There's the divide. You can be an entertainer, which is fine, but then you're playing the entertainer game, which basically means you need to have great production quality and or be funnier, better looking, consistently reliable, or like whatever than everybody else who's out there. Like when you're playing that game, I mean, you're a hamster in a hamster wheel. Being a YouTuber is just about the hardest, most difficult job you could ever imagine. And it's very rare for them not to burn out. But that's entertainment, right? So you either get really, 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 really good at that, or you become really, really good at educating practically, legitimately wanting to serve the people that you're trying to serve. And if you can do that in a way that's a little bit entertaining, at least that's what I'm trying to do, I think you've got a real winner. But time will tell in January 2025 whether that works.
It seems like the entertainers are always like, feels like they're always under the foot of looking for opportunities for income, right? I mean, if you can do it, there are opportunities, but it's not a direct translation to income. Like you can get a big enough following or become a big enough brand yourself, and you may get hired. You could find yourself in a Target ad for, Healthy January, or you could represent some supplement line or something to that effect. It just always felt like the harder play to me and the least direct path to income. But the person that can simplify something and make it really incredibly practical, it just, in my experience personally and my experience working with our students, those are the people that make a really good living without doing a lot of things in the social media space.
It's the least direct path to income, but it's potentially the largest amount of income. There's a line, let me find it, that I quoted somebody else in the book for this line. So this is mine. This is from Steph Smith, who's a podcaster. But one of the things that she wrote is, in reality, so long as you, number one, choose your daily actions wisely, and number two, consistently execute over time, good things will reliably happen. To be clear, consistency isn't necessarily the easiest way to success, but one that can be achieved with a higher level of certainty. And I think that's what it comes down to. It's not necessarily the easiest. It's not even necessarily the most rewarding. or the most rewarded, like superficially, like financially, but it is the most reliable to achieve. And so if you're going to make bets, you're going to make bets on that working. But the people who do it the other way, the ones who win often win bigger than the ones who are consistent, but there's way more people who win based off of what we're talking about here, which is this kind of, I mean, I call it much more consistent approach, right? Where you're right. They are either largely ignoring social media or using social media to serve their existing customers.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think about the CrossFit gym that I go to, where their account posts the workouts for the week. Like it's basically a broadcast channel for the community. Its job is not to generate customers. Its job is to celebrate existing exercisers, shares videos of them every once in a while, who, whatever, take a video of somebody, not even that often. And then just like broadcast the workouts that we're going to be doing so that I know not to show up on a day when we're doing burpees.
That makes sense. I also feel like I saw your feet on social media today, and I've been perplexed by that ever since. It's like,
You saw my feet on social
yeah,
media?
I'm pretty sure you were in a chair talking about something, and I think you were
Oh,
shirtless. Yeah.
yeah. We put up some videos we put up the first video of a few that we collected from a talk that I gave. It was like a fireside talk to a few hundred people, and yeah, I mean, I'm always barefoot when I speak, just because I don't know if you have the chance to be barefoot or not be barefoot. What would you choose?
I
Like
guess not. Guess not.
be
I don't know.
barefoot.
It's
You know
just
what I'm saying?
it's just a surprise. I wasn't expecting it. As I was going about my mid morning, it's like, are those Goodman's feet? And then it prompted an idea for another Dr. Seuss project. Whenever that birthday comes around, feet in the seat.
Yeah.
I think that's John, and John's very neat. I might be mistaken, but are his feet in the seat? So I've got my opening line already. So we'll see how that comes out. Q1 2024.
So this next, I'm not going to read this whole passage because it's too long. But I'll tell you the basic story of it, and then I'll read the last line of it. But the context to this is we talk a lot about letting your geek flag fly. We talk a lot about going deep in one market and how important it is to be a big fish in a small pond, as opposed to trying to be a small fish in a big pond. The question is, oh, well, how do I grow out of that? And my response is kind of twofold. The first is you probably never need to, because most small ponds have more than enough consumers anyway for you, and you probably won't ever need to. But this is a good example here that he gives of how to strategically kind of go after a smaller market, but then know that you're going to go bigger. So the example that he gives is Justin's Peanut Butter, which is just like a peanut butter company, I guess. And the founder was asked, I guess his name was Justin, I don't know. It'd be funny if his name was like James or something. And he's like, yeah, no, but like James Peanut Butter doesn't sound so good. But I guess his name was Justin. And he was asked why he started with creamy peanut butter instead of crunchy. And his response was that he found that folks who liked crunchy peanut butter were also more than happy to eat creamy, but people who liked creamy would rather have nothing than eat crunchy. And so what Ryan said, so there you go. So what Ryan said to this is, the key to this is to service the core audience first and do so in a way that does not alienate the others. Only then can you emanate outward from the center. I thought that was a good example because we talk all the time, Amber, about how important it is to focus on your core audience. But we don't really talk about how important it is when you're choosing that core audience and communicating with them to say, okay, well, we need to be specifically for somebody, but that doesn't mean we need to be against people who aren't that person. And so I don't know. Can you think of an example like that? I mean, like moms who have had yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely that. It's like, well, I want to help, all parents. Like, pick one, whoever's in your network first,
But
knock that out of the park, and then announce, the other partner. And what a great way to do it, because now you have all of the success with that primary parent that you went after. Now their significant others can jump on board and have that on to come into. So I mean,
well,
that's
so would this be a good example? I mean, this is kind of like a sexist statement, so tell me if I'm wrong or not. But I mean, my history has shown me that it's true or not, or that it is true, but that women don't seem to have much of an issue training with their husband's personal trainer, but husbands seem to have a lot of problems training with their wife's personal trainer.
Oh, I can speak to that.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I've run into is the fact that as men, I think we prefer to solve our problems. And if we look to a solution from some other person, they need to edify us as men, right? Like,
Right.
so either I'm going to get in shape, or an IFBB pro is going to get me, or IBBF, I get confused on it, or a bodybuilder is going to get me in shape, right? Either I'm going to learn how to fight, or a boxer who's won a belt is going to help me fight. Like, either I'm going to do it because that edifies me, or
Right.
someone so far superior to my skill level is going to do it because that also edifies me. Yeah, my trainer is Tony Jeffries. Yeah, he's all over YouTube. He won an Olympic bronze in '08 for the UK, right? And I have had that experience with Tony Jeffries, and I also say that when I
Right.
explain that I've got a fitness boxing certification. But the worst thing by far is to let the woman that you love find a solution and then invite you to that solution. Nothing challenges the male ego and masculinity like, my wife solved this even worse through another man,
Yeah.
and even worse, now I'm following that other man that my wife endorses.
Right.
Ego can't take that.
I think we can. I think we can all agree that this is just yet another point where men are really stupid. But
It is.
it's. I mean, it also is very true, though.
Very true.
So if you wanted to build a business where you needed to specifically work with and target one type of person, but you wanted to eventually grow out of that, I think this speaks for it. Let's move on to this next one. He says that, and this is a quote. So there's kind of two parts that I'm going to patch together. So this is like on two different pages, but I'm going to read them together. So the first is, he says, Seneca wrote that what's required is confidence in yourself and the belief that you are on the right path, and not led astray by the many tracks which cross yours of people who are hopelessly lost. That's number one. Basically, other people are lost and have no idea what they're doing. So don't copy them because they don't know what they're doing. Number two is, and this is a separate part of the book. So he says, likewise, if you've fallen into the sway of tracking your fellow creators on social media, or you check the charts every week to see what other people are doing, you're going to sap yourself of the discipline required to do what you are trying to do. Only crazy people would compare themselves to people on totally different tracks. You don't know what somebody else's goal is. You don't even know if they have a goal. You don't know if they're happy or sad. All that you see is that they're getting superficial validation in the forms of likes. You don't know whether that's what they actually want. You don't know whether it's turning into business. You don't know whether they're ignoring their family. Because I know people who do that in order to get their post up today. I've fallen prey doing that in the past. I speak from experience. And I check myself afterwards because walk downstairs and I see Jaden sitting in his high chair at breakfast, just about to finish. And I see Calvin, who has already finished breakfast. And I see Allison over there, and I go over to give her a kiss and say good morning, and realize what a fucking idiot I've been. Because I missed that moment with my family. Because I just had to get that post up on Instagram to impress people who I don't know, who I probably wouldn't care about if I ever met them, for no other reason than you can only really care about a very small amount of people in your life. And I know people who do this day in and day out. They never have breakfast with their family because their morning is when they write and they post to social media. And these people have more followers than me. And that's fine. And it might also be fine with them because their goals might be different than my goals, which is also perfectly fine. But when I sit back and I think what I really want to get out of life, out of business, I realize that for me, there is a balance at play. I realize that for me, there are trade-offs at play. I realize that for me, optimizing for social media growth represents trade-offs in my personal life that I'm not willing to make. And so to compare myself to other people that are doing that with perhaps different goals or desired outcomes, whether they do or not, I have no idea. Their actions show that they do. Whether that's something that they've become happy with themselves or not, I don't know. Either way, it's ridiculous to think that I should compare myself to them in any way. In my eyes, for what I want, if I were to do what they're doing, I would consider myself to be hopelessly lost. And I think it's important to check in with yourself on that.
It feels like the more people I meet, the less people I know that check in with themselves ever. Right? It's like everybody's chasing this fictitious avatar of human that just, I don't know. It seems like a lot of people are just distracted from themselves, right? But not attracted to anything necessarily, just kind of distracted from everything by something else.
So the next chapter that I'm writing, that I'll hopefully get started on a bit today. I think I'm just gonna finish all my preparation stuff to just get to it probably tomorrow. But it's about easy, and I talk about why we often choose harder things than is necessary. There's a really interesting case study where the I think he was the chairman of like the National Cancer Society or something. He was like the lead scientist for the Cancer Research Association, I think that it was. And he came out and said, I know full well that getting people to stop smoking is the single best thing we can do to help with cancer. But that's not intellectually stimulating to me. And so I don't do it. It's intellectually stimulating to work on reaction, biochemistry, genes. And it's very important to work on that. And this man has done phenomenal work in that field. But to have somebody come out and say, actually, the psychology of getting somebody to exercise more, the psychology of getting somebody to not smoke, the psychology of getting somebody to take better care of their bodies so that they reduce their chances of getting cancer, would render much of what I'm doing over here much less important. But I'm not interested in that. I'm only interested in this because it seems harder. That's fucking fascinating.
And also what she said.
Also what she said. 50 minutes and 2 seconds. Count it.
We almost missed an episode. Damn it. We were razor sharp to being off our game today. I'm not going to let that, not on my watch, Jonathan. Not with those feet you got.
Well, I'm glad that you let that one slip out a little bit.
Also, as she said.
But that's fascinating, isn't it?
It's
that we feel the need to make things harder than they do. When you look at a book, or when you look at what somebody has produced and there's a lot of pages to it, metaphorically or physically, you say, wow, that person must have put a lot of work into it. Whereas the reality of it is, a really well put together piece of work should not have that many pages in almost every case. What did Mark Twain say? Sorry I didn't have more time, or else I would have written you a shorter letter.
Hey.
And it's true. But the problem is that when we see something that is long and big, we can assume that there was work that put into it. When it's short, we have to consume the thing to know whether it's good or not.
Ren, you want to take that one?
It's too easy, and therefore I'm not interested in it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of space around the edges for it to go in, right? You don't even need to aim well.
Not interested.
Amber, your face seems to have gone a different shade of red in the last minute or two.
Oh,
I got one more from this book, from Perennial Summit. He says, in fact, Nike itself started this way, with Phil Knight selling the shoes himself as track meets out of the back of his Valiant. He'd been rejected from all the local stores, but found that when he spent time actually talking to runners and coaches, he couldn't write orders fast enough. Hoo boy.
Yeah.
How many humans have you spoken to today, my friend? Are you being rejected on social media? Have you called up that person who you admire and they said no to you? Well, how many people that you think are right for your service have you actually had a conversation to? Have you driven to the track meet and shook hands with the athletes and said, would you like to try on these shoes? That's a metaphor. If you do that, you will find that it's a way easier to make sales. And in most of the things that we do, I mean, most of the people who are listening to this are in a service profession, probably health, fitness, not necessarily. We're starting to bridge very much out of that market, but I'd say still the majority are in that market. You don't need a lot of customers. Even gyms, right? 200, 300 good members make for a very, very, very profitable gym. You don't need a lot of customers. And so to think that you need 10,000 followers on social media, to think that you need the acceptance of some guru that you admire in order to be a success is goddamn ridiculous. It's just, from a pure math perspective, it's ridiculous. Let alone just how obvious it is that that's just simply not true. And if you think that you can't grow big as a result of this from talking to people, this is the founder of Nike. Okay? There's nothing more that I need to say. It always starts here. One of the things that has been fascinating as I've been writing The Obvious Choice book is how much of a philosophy this is, and how much actually the principles, I think that I'm actually going to call each chapter a law. Because it's interesting because it almost so many of them fly in the face of a lot of the advice that you see. But if you actually think about it, this is the law of how these businesses work. Peter Thiel, who is one of the biggest founders in startup history. Did I talk about this on this podcast? I spoke to somebody else about this. Might have spoken about this last week. Peter Thiel was one of the founders of PayPal, first investor in Facebook, amongst many other things. And one of his best insights, I think, is that in order to build a business, the goal of any business is to get to a monopoly as fast as possible. The easiest way to get to a monopoly as fast as possible is to go after the smallest available market and expand outwards. And so what you actually need to do is you go after the smallest amount of customers. You build a product or service, probably a product because he's in scalable tech, that uniquely serves their needs. And then you go to where those people are and you show them that you have something for their needs. Facebook started with 10,000 students at Harvard. It got to 60% market share in 10 days. PayPal started with about 30,000 power sellers on eBay. That's how it started. It was a very specific online payment service for people who sell at volume in the early days of eBay. And now it's PayPal, and now it's Facebook. And go on and on and on and on and on. They all became the obvious choice to a few. Nike started as running shoes that Phil Knight sold out of his Valiant at track meets by talking to people. And now it's Nike. So yes, this works. I mean, I don't have any desire to go big, right? But it still works if you want to scale big. This is still where you start, are these laws of being the obvious choice. But even if you don't, it's still a phenomenal way to have a just wonderful business that's low stress and high profit, devoid of any of the existential bullshit that we're made to think that we have to do in order to be a success these days, for no other reason than other companies have different goals that misalign with yours, where they generate profit basically if they get you to work for free by making you think that you're going to achieve your goals by working for them for free. And it's just simply not true unless you want to be a creator. I want to be a creator when I grow up, Mom and Dad. What the fuck does that even mean? You're fucking dancer on the internet, man. You're not creating shit. You're just dancing. That's my opinion. Yeah. Anyway.
They make those words appear over their head, John. There's got to be a talent based on that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they just type it in, right?
Oh.
Like I think that's how they do it. They just type it on their phone, don't they?
Shit, I thought it was magic. I got to go back and watch some more. I thought
No, I think they just type it.
Whole shitload of words.
Really?
I can't even read what she's saying. So many words.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you just type it. I think you just write it. I think it's as simple as that. What I don't understand is how people match it so the words pop up like with the music. Like, are they actually sitting there listening to the music and then timing the timing the word in the little editing thing? Are they actually doing that?
There's some.
They use beat sync.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
An AI does that. They match it to the beat. The software matches it to the beat for them.
So
like apps like Captions do that.
Mm-hmm. Think about, we live in an age.
I don't even know what you're gonna say, but it's already funny.
We live in an age where the smartest people in the world are building shit like that. Think about this for a moment and just how absolutely ridiculous that is.
Oh, man.
Think about how absolutely insane that is. that people are going to like MIT and getting a computer science degree so that they can create an app that matches words in space to the beats of a song so that somebody can influence online a little bit better. I mean, to each their own, I guess. It's so clearly not for me, man. God. Oh my God. Yeah, I got to get some food. All right. That's the pod. Well, thank you for listening, as always, to the Obvious Choice podcast. I hope that you enjoyed that. Pick up a copy of Perennial Seller. It really is a fantastic book. Like I said, it's what I think the most underrated of Ryan's books. Even though it's not the most popular, I think it's the most useful for people who want to do real work in the real world. If you are still wanting to hear a little bit more, if you're not done on your walk and your drive, whatever it is, I recommend you check out episode 102. That's episode 102. It's called Stop Working and then in quotes on your business. This came about because of the amount of times people would say, oh yeah, no, I'm working on my business right now. Yeah, no, it's not going great, but yeah, I'm working on my business. And the response that I kind of started to have after that over a long period of time was like, what are you actually doing? Like, what does working on your business really mean? Because your business has a lot of different parts. And if you try to work in them all at the same time, you're going to fall flat. You're going to dilute your efforts. And so in this episode, we kind of break down that idea of like, you can't work on your business. That's not a thing to work on. There are different aspects of your business to try to improve one by one by one. And together they make up your business, but you have to actually focus on one of them at a time. So that's episode 102. Have a listen to that. And we'll talk about what are the different aspects and how to actually work on each of those aspects. How many were there? I think there was like 6 of them. How many was it? Do you remember? 7. There were 7 things to work on that you could pick and choose. And some of them you might find that you're doing well already. Some of them you might find that you're going to put some focus on it. And then I give the recommendation to work in 2-week sprints. So to say, for these 2 weeks, we're going hard into this one skill, right? This one aspect of the business. 2 weeks, all in. Okay, cool. Maybe if the next 2 weeks, we're going to hit this one again, or maybe we're going to go to another one, whatever it is, you're just focused for those 2 weeks. So that's episode 102, Stop Working Quotes on Your Business. Thank you for listening. This is fun. Sorry that took about 50 minutes and 2 seconds to get your penis joke. Yeah. One day we're gonna have music. I feel like Amber, we're gonna have like radio DJ music.
Oh.
And I mean, we're probably not, if I'm honest, but where you can just like press a button or like in post production, it just brings up. It's like ding 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 ding. Penis joke of the day. Let's go. It's gonna be something like that.
Me and Ashley Rogers will work on it.
Yeah.
She'll love this project.
Good. Okay. Well,
shout out to Ashley.
Shout out Ashley. All right. Awesome. That's the pod. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.